Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Wacked Wednesday. You may notice that in lieu of an introduction song, we have a special guest on the show today. We've been talking about him for the last couple of weeks. His name is Todd, guys. Professor here at MJC. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing this morning, Todd?
I'm doing good. I'm ready.
You ready for this interview?
Yeah.
All right, Alan, start us off there.
Definitely.
Okay, so Todd, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you come from? Where did Todd guy
come from?
Yeah.
Well, really, I came from the East Coast, and we came out to California in 1967, in the summer of 1967. And we came out of, I wasn't living in Detroit, Michigan, but we came out through Detroit, Michigan. And actually, even though I was only 6 years old at the time in 1967, I remember the trip was in the summer. It was hot. And as we were leaving Michigan, we were passing by tanks in the city of Detroit because it was during all the racial tension back then in 1967. Did I know all of that? No. I was just wondering, why are there these huge tanks? How fun, I thought. And then we drove cross country out to California. I've lived in the East Bay pretty much then the rest of my life and most of my life in the Walnut Creek area, San Francisco, a few years down in LA, and then out here in the Central Valley once I got my job here at Modesto Junior College. But Northern California is my home and really where I grew up. Went to all local schools around my neighborhood and then went to went to Diablo Valley College actually after high school. So I've been through the community college ranks. And then I went down to Long Beach to get my bachelor's at Cal State Long Beach, and then I got my master's at San Francisco State University. Started teaching all over the place, and then finally got my job here at MJC back in 1992.
Wow. So when you were thinking about college, you mentioned that you were going to Long Beach. Why did you decide to go to Long Beach? What's different about Long Beach than was different about any other college?
It had areas of study that I was interested in. So I wanted to go into theater and acting at that time, and so I looked at schools that had theater departments. But then I also knew that I had an interest in radio. So I wanted to go to a school that had both theater and radio, and then I thought, and if it's going to have theater and radio, then I also wanted to have TV. And I looked at those schools, and I think it was really only San Francisco State, Northridge, Long Beach, and maybe San Diego. And I applied to the 4, and I think Long Beach was the first to respond, and so I just decided that I was going to go down there. But I guess my sister was also going to school at Cal State Long Beach at the time, so that probably also played into why I chose that out of the 4, just to have some family down there too.
Well, so you mentioned you went to school like pretty much all over. I think the East Bay you mentioned in the Walnut Creek area. You went to Diablo Valley College, and you went to what were the other ones?
San Francisco State was the university, but the other schools. I was at Monte Vista High School out in Danville. And actually that's kind of where I got some of my experience in speech and started to get an interest in forensics and competitive speech.
Were the classes of speech and communications that were offered at those schools really, really good at the time? Was there areas for improvement there? Or what do you think of them now?
Well, at Monte Vista, there wasn't... I mean, back in the days, I think when I was going to high school, there weren't too many speech classes at a high school, I don't think. And basically, it wasn't like a public speech class like students might take at MJC. It was more of just, it dealt with everything. So I think we did. So it was more of like a competitive speech class, and so we learned about debate, we learned about platform speaking, and then I think we also learned about oral interpretation of literature. Oh no, we definitely did. Yeah, he taught everything. And the instructor I had for that class, I really kind of, Al Gentile was his name, and he was really instrumental in making me want to do more performance-wise as well. And then I went to Diablo Valley College, and the speech department at Diablo Valley College at that time was extremely strong for speech departments in Northern California. Not only with their speech team, but just as a department as a whole. There were 3 instructors there, Paul Phelan, Dick Johnston, and Bill Poshman. And all 3 of them coached the team. So the whole department was involved in their speech team and competition, and then they taught a variety of classes, and so they were very strong. When I went down to Cal State Long Beach, then I kind of moved away from speech and just strictly looked at theater, and just dealt with their theater department down there. And then when I came back to San Francisco State for my master's, I then also went. Then I switched, and it was solely speech communication for my master's, and so I'd separated from theater and said, okay, this is what I want to focus on at this point. And like any program for a master's or a bachelor's degree, there are good instructors and bad instructors. There's so many instructors in those departments that sometimes there's weaker people.
So did you always want to study communications, or was there a point before that where you were like, no, I want to study this, but that eventually led you to communications? Why communications?
Why communications? Well, really, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a stand-up comic.
Really?
I wanted to be a stand-up comic. And then I realized, well, I'm funny, but I'm not that funny. Because, I was watching people, when I was growing up, I was watching people like Bill Cosby and Richard Pryor, and those were really, George Carlin was huge back then. Jonathan Winters was huge back then. And I couldn't be as funny as those guys, I just knew it. But I did love to perform, so really my whole idea, even when I went to Diablo Valley College, I went with the mindset that, I want to get into theater and I want to get into acting. I didn't really know back then if I could get into something like acting in television. I didn't know how that was done, or if there were programs for it. Certainly on the community college level, there wasn't. Community college hadn't progressed that far to have like television departments or anything like that. And so I went to DVC for that reason. However, it was, and I think from what I understand, it still is. It's a very cliquish group. It was very difficult to break into. They did a lot with people from the community that weren't necessarily interested in getting a degree. So for their productions, they would cast people more from their communities and not care about the students in the classes or anything along that line, because they wanted to make money. And they certainly made a lot of money with their productions. And they still do. They still have a huge following. And so the only way that I could perform, I found, was through the speech department. And then I found this idea of competitive speech, which I kind of was introduced to in high school. And so that kind of fueled my performance desires. And then when I went down to Cal State Long Beach, their theater department was so strong and had so many opportunities that I never looked into speech communications.
So you were just at Long Beach. You were just a theater
geek.
junkie, yeah.
Yeah. Right. I worked on all their shows. You were either in the show or you were working on the show, and it was 24/7 theater, and so that was pretty cool. But then after you graduate, certainly then you have to find a job and you have to have real life. And I had real life in theater down in Long Beach and the LA area, and I went, wow, this is going to be really hard. Do I want to live with the pet rats that you make friends with because they live in your apartment? And live in an apartment with like a mattress on the floor and a fork, a knife, and a spoon, a plate, and a bowl, and a glass to your name. That's it. That's all you got.
That's all you have.
And the clothing that your parents let you, have, because certainly it's all your clothing from your growing up. And is that how I want to live? And so I started thinking about, no, I want to find a way that I can be secure and still perform. And so I decided to go into teaching. And in going into teaching, I then decided, well, instead of going into theater and teach theater, I'd rather teach and speech and then maybe perform in my evenings. And do theater in the evenings.
Right.
And so then I came back up. My parents still lived in the East Bay in the Walnut Creek area, and I came back up and decided to look into San Francisco State's speech department. I knew they had a pretty strong speech team. And so I looked into their master's program, and at that time, which was pretty nice. It was back in 1983 or 84. I walked in and I talked to someone about what does it take to be in their master's program, and they said, "You're really interested in getting a master's in speech?" And I said, "Yep." And they said, "Here, fill out this paperwork." Okay, cool. We've got some classes that start like in a week. Go ahead, come to the first day of classes. We need more people. And so I really got lucky because San Francisco State's master's program was hurting at the time for students.
Right.
And so they were accepting anyone and everyone. And usually you have to do a GRE test before you get accepted to a master's program.
What's a GRE test?
Graduate... I don't know, a graduate requirement examination maybe, or graduate required examination. It's just like an SAT test for if you have to take to get into your bachelor's program, an SAT or a
ACT.
Or ACT. And so it's just that type of test before you would start
Nice.
in like a master's program. So, but San Francisco State was like, no, don't worry. Just take that test before you finish your first semester. That's how badly they do it.
Really? Wow.
So I was like,
That's
cool. This is like the door's open. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna go with it. And so that's how I got into their program. And their program was good. It was pretty sound. And I got my degree, and then I thought I would start, I would find teaching jobs and then start acting in the evenings, but I started coaching forensics, and then there was no time for anything but teaching and coaching. That was it. So acting went the wayside.
What would you say to those that say teaching is the only thing that you can get a communications degree?
It just is. That's not true. That's what I would say. Well, that's not true. That's not true. No, you can do a lot of things with it. I decided to go into teaching, and I probably decided to go into teaching because I didn't realize where the communications degree could take me. because it could have taken me into broadcasting as well, even without a broadcasting degree. It could have taken me into broadcasting. Probably in the Central Valley, I would say a communications degree could take you into broadcasting. Because the first place that I would say to someone now at MJC, if they're interested in broadcasting, and we don't have a broadcasting degree, and you get your degree, let's say in communication studies, your AA degree in communication studies is, we have a radio station in Modesto. And so go to that radio station and find a way to work there. And if it's being an apprentice at first, so you're not really getting paid to do it, but you're getting your foot in the door and you're getting known, go ahead and do that. We had a student, and the funny thing is, I think his first name was Alan too.
Really?
And it was at the very beginning. See, we had a TV production department here. They didn't have degrees, so you couldn't necessarily get your AA in TV production. And we had a student who took some of the TV classes, got his AA in speech communications at the time, and then went up to Sacramento, and it's like channel 58, I think. And they do like a Good Day Sacramento, which is kind of like a Today show, but on a much smaller scale, and not with a major network.
Did his last name have?
And he started working as an apprentice, and then all of a sudden became one of their in the field reporters. And just kind of, took his career from there.
I think I know who you're talking about.
But one last thing, and that is, and then we have a student. Her name is Rebecca Benjamin. She trains salespeople.
Really?
So in essence, I guess you could say, well, that's still kind of teaching. But she is with a specific corporation that deals with construction material for large, high-rise skyscraper type buildings, and this company sells the material to then the organizations that are going to build these things.
Right.
And she trains the salespeople to go out to construction sites or go to construction groups and sell the materials that they then make.
Ooh.
And so, and she did that all with a communications degree. But you can take communications into business, and certainly you can use it to supplant multiple degrees as well.
So over the years, you've taken communications. You've been involved in communications for like a really long time. Has communications as a field evolved for the better over the years? From where you were to now, let's say. Is it still the same? Is it have they improved in their methodology? What's your
mainly I guess you're talking about the field of communications.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I would say definitely the field of communications has expanded. We used to be a speech department, but we are now a communication studies department. And because we're communication studies, it kind of now has provided us the feeling that we want to expand and grow. And so next semester, for the very first time, we're going to have a communication studies course, which, like a music appreciation or art appreciation, where you look at the history of art, the history of music, this class will be providing students the ability, if they have the desire, to learn about the history of communication studies, which, again, as a speech class, we never really thought about doing a class like that because we were specifically speech. And so if we were to put together a music appreciation, it would be like, speech appreciation. And we'd look at the history of platform speaking, which is more of like a rhetoric or a rhetorical class. It's and usually those classes are, much more higher division. If you were to transfer to Berkeley and look into communication studies, it would be a class you'd be taking during like your senior year, or maybe not until your first year in a master's program.
Wow.
So that's why, certainly here at at MJC, we never.
DVC?
Yeah, right. I got DVC in my mind now. At MJC, we never looked into that type of class. But expanding to communication studies, now all of a sudden we can teach this history of communication studies class, where I'm going to be able to be teaching about the history of radio, the history of television. Communication studies is the history of video games.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at, video games and where they began and how they've grown and how they influence society. So in that way, our field has definitely grown and expanded. And in another way it's expanded, certainly, is that communication studies has become, I think, more important now than it was back in 1992.
Really?
Because of technology. There was an article in the Modesto Bee this weekend about, and it was an editorial, I think it was Jeff Jardine, and he was talking about going out for a meal at a restaurant and watching a couple at a table texting the whole time and not talking about it. So, back in 92, we never even thought about that. If you were with someone else, you kind of had to communicate, or there'd be these long, awkward pauses as you just kind of looked around. Yeah. Nothing for you to do except be with this person. So, what is that doing to our communication? Yeah. There are some positive things, but then so there's probably, because I don't want to sound like the technology is a horrible thing, but there's probably just as many problems that come out of our technology communication as there are advantages to it.
Right.
And so then certainly that gives us more to study and look at.
Yeah. You were the coach of the speech and debate team I seen on the MJC Forensics website. I seen some of the archives on there, and you were the coach of it.
Right.
What was that like, being the coach of the speech and debate team?
I loved it. It is a great avenue for people who want to improve their communication skills. But then it's also a great avenue for people who are extremely competitive and are looking for some type of competitive avenue. And maybe you are not the most athletic person, and so being on a sports team is going to, not really be something you can do. But you've got this competitive side that you want to do. You want to let it out, and so the speech and debate team was an ability to do that. But then the other thing that I really truly loved about it as well is that, some of the athletes that we have on campus here at MJC are also brilliant communicators. And so the other thing that I think about with the competitive side of forensics was how many athletes we had who injured themselves and have this huge starvation for being a part of competition, but they can't play their sport anymore. Soccer players, tennis players, swimmers, and so they then joined the team, used that communication skills that they had, and got some of that competitive drive that builds up inside of you, and we're able to release that.
One last question before we wrap up and go on to part 2 next week. You develop your lesson plan. Obviously, you're a teacher. How do you develop your lesson plan? Is there a specific method that you follow, or is it just more like on the fly, inspirationally based?
Well, I started teaching. I started having the ability to teach back in 1986.
Wow.
So.
What do you mean by that? You had the ability.
I was teaching part-time. I'd gotten my degree 1986, I finished my master's degree, and so I was starting to do classes and starting to teach. Back then, I think I probably did a lot of what did I do in my public speaking class? What book did I use? Okay, I'm going to use that book as a teacher now. What were the assignments that Professor Johnson had us doing? Okay, I'm going to do those assignments. And over the years, it's just kind of like, increased and through what I've seen and gathered up. But I was thinking about this question a lot this weekend, because really now I think it is, okay, I've got 5 minutes before class. Let's start thinking about what I'm going to do today. Let's see, I've got to talk about visual aids today in my class. Oh, yeah, okay, all right, I can do that. Okay, cool. Intros and conclusion. Okay, I got that, all right. So now it's much more on the fly.
Just inspirationally based.
I can do that because I've been teaching since 1986.
Right.
And I almost don't really remember, and certainly this communication studies class that I'll get to teach in the fall will probably force me to sit down and really go, okay, you've got to plan out every single day, because it's information that certainly I've been surrounded with and I've looked at over the years, but it's not something that I've been teaching, and it's not ingrained in me. So I've got to feel comfortable with it to be able to present it to students. And so that'll take a lot more time for me to put together.
Now, how do you handle a full load of classes without losing your mind or your hair? Because I know teachers I've seen, like, I need to pull my hair out. So how do you handle that without going crazy?
Well, if there are pictures of me coaching back in the 90s where I had a lot more hair. So I don't know how successful I've been.
You're not that bald. You have hair.
I don't know. Luckily, it's curly so that it kind of covers up spots.
Yeah.
If you're going to go into this, you just better like doing it. That's the big thing. You just better like doing it. And I don't know, you just, different instructors have different types of mindsets. Some work very hard, handhold their students a lot. And I don't go crazy because I couldn't do that kind of stuff. If I did that type of stuff, it would drive me crazy. I think that's one of the reasons why I stepped out of forensics as well, was that forensics is very demanding, and there's a huge responsibility as a coach to make your students successful. It's important for their future, and that was extremely stressful. But I enjoyed it. I loved doing it. Now I find my job much less stressful because I don't have as much invested in it. My motto is, it's okay to fail.
There you go. I like that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today on Wacked Out Wednesday. Thank you, Todd, for joining us today.
Todd, before we go, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with us, for us, or with anybody who might be listening?
No, I'd love to come back and
right.
we'll do even more of this.
Yeah.
Well, I guess just remember, it's okay to fail.
There you go. I like that.
Well,
Todd, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully you come back next week. Thank you, Todd. We'll see you later, guys. Bye-bye.